You know what is really worrying me, though, right now? Now, this is a new poll out today. Canadians pick Mark Carney over Pierre Poilievre, Chrystia Freeland, and Karina Gould, well, who cares, to negotiate with Donald Trump. This is a Nanos survey. Generally, Nanos is not on the far left of pollsters who are seeking to produce documents to resuscitate the Liberal Party or to keep Justin Trudeau in power or to elect Mark Carney. So this worries me. Are Canadians falling for this nonsense that Mark Carney is some kind of economic whiz, that he's been successful instead of the failure he's been in all of his jobs, that he's not some sort of wandering globalist who's come back to Canada to inflict the WEF and its globalist agenda on all of us? That's exactly why he's here. Look at this. 40% picked Mark Carney as the man to negotiate with Donald Trump. 26% Pierre Poilievre. And others came in there. Now, I am highly suspicious of this poll, but like I say, the source is not as bad as some of the other sources suggesting the Liberals are way ahead in Ontario or the Conservatives have fallen like a rock. Those polls I'm not buying at all. But this one I need to look closely on. This just came out this morning. I find it very worrisome and very, very problematic. Listen, before I get to the real kicker here, I'm going to save it for the very end of the show. But what Mark Carney's really proposing for Canada is absolutely frightening, and it could be cataclysmic to the Canadian economy. But here's a little bit of celebration of Mark Carney, and you can see where the national media is going in terms of pushing, promoting Mark Carney.
For Justin Trudeau next month is Mark Carney, of course. Today he was in Windsor, Ontario, a key border city that does so much trade with the United States. Right across the bridge is Detroit, Michigan. And of course, Windsor is the front line of our country's automotive sector. We heard from Carney talking about trade and tariffs. He said, we all have to wake up. It is a very different world for Canada now that Trump is back in the White House.
Whether we can influence President Trump is debatable. But I think we can, if we listen to what Americans want and respond in ways that are best for Canada. However, we need to be crystal clear about our bottom lines. This proud country will never be part of the United States in any shape or form.
Hear, hear.
Tom Mulcair, CTV News political commentator, former leader of the NDP, is joining us now from Montreal. Tom, good to see you on this Wednesday.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Yeah, so talk to me about Mark Carney there, trying to look perhaps like a prime minister in waiting.
And doing a pretty darn good job, choosing a good place. I mean, his campaign is rolling out as a very strong set.
A prime minister in waiting. These are the key words now. He's a prime minister in waiting. He understands the Canadian economy, but no other political leader out there. This is the message we're going to be hearing. These are the talking points. And now we've got Tommy Mulcair promoting Mark Carney. And just, it's incredible how they're trying to present this man, who I think is absolutely clueless on the economy, has said some incredibly stupid things, such as, and I'm not going to show it again today, but I've shown it to you twice already, how he doesn't think steel is a product that's used in the daily devices that Canadians use.
What's he doing in Windsor, Ontario? I think you held the key. Look at the mayor there. Mayor Dilkins is really strong, working with mayors in the northern U.S., trying to make everybody in the States understand that we have everything to lose from this trade war and a lot to gain by continuing our good relationship. So Carney's there, beating his drum, saying, look, this is the way I would deal with it. I think that Americans understand that there are certain things that are non-negotiable, like Canada becoming the 51st state. And he's addressing, of course, Trump directly with that, because Trump was using that taunt right up until the moment before he announced his so-called 30-day pause. So Carney's showing the depth of his experience. He also had a little bit of fun, talking to a crowd last night about Trump in a way that probably pleased the crowd, but probably wouldn't please Trump. But I think that's part and parcel of introducing himself to Canadian voters.
We also heard from Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservatives, Tom. He is in Vancouver, and he held a press conference earlier today in which he went after Mark Carney, saying a couple of things. Number one, Carney is just more Trudeau. Number two, this guy is an elitist. He's a globalist. He's out of touch. Number three, that this government under Justin Trudeau has failed Canadians in terms of the relationship with Trump, and that's why we almost were in a trade war. We're going to be hearing a lot more of that language, no doubt, from Pierre Poilievre.
Mr. Poilievre is searching for a way to stop the slide that his Conservatives are in ever since Mr. Trudeau announced he was leaving. His whole campaign was going to have two main pillars. One was attacking Justin Trudeau, and of course the other one was attacking the carbon tax. The leading contenders for the Liberal leadership, including Carney and Chrystia Freeland, have both said they're planning to step away from the carbon tax as proposed by Trudeau. Bit hard to believe in the case of Freeland because she's the one who brought it in, but be that as it may, nobody is pushing the carbon tax. And at the same time, of course, Trudeau is gone, or will be, as soon as the new leader is chosen. So
now, as we'll discover in a minute, he's not backing away from the carbon tax. Mark Carney's not backing away from the carbon tax. He's simply renaming it. He's introducing it in a far more devastating way than it's already been let loose on Canadians. And we'll get to that in a minute, because this is fundamental, foundational to why Mark Carney would be cataclysmic for Canada and the economy.
That it just leaves Poilievre flailing, looking for a target. So he's doing a pretty darn good job, I have to say, of keeping himself in the news, but he doesn't have a lot to sell because all the stuff that he said he was going to be running on is not there anymore. And so he's got to go after Carney personally, calling him an elitist and a globalist. Well, let's parse that for 1 second. Mark Carney was born in the Northwest Territories, raised in northern Alberta, played hockey for his team in.
What does any of this matter? Where he was born, where he was raised, and I'm sick to death of hearing about where he played hockey and when. It's nothing to do with what this man has done in his career, who he's represented, and that's never been Canada. He's always represented globalist interests. And Poilievre is right about this. But I think he needs to really get at where Mark Carney intends to introduce globalist concepts into the federal government in a way that Justin Trudeau was beginning to do, but probably never imagined. This man is dangerous. Well, I'll listen to a bit more, then I'll get to the next step here.
In Oxford, in England, was the team's goalie. I mean, he's the all-Canadian boy, very modest background. His dad was a school principal. So what makes him an elitist in Pierre Poilievre's mind? Well, the fact that he attends global economic summits and things like that. Now, if you compare him, so Carney's been the governor of the Bank of Canada, governor of the Bank of England. He's held positions at the highest level of the United Nations in terms of environment, climate, and sustainable development. Oh, and he was the chairman of the board of some of the largest investment funds in the world. And let's compare that with Pierre Poilievre, who's been a member of parliament. So if you look at their two CVs, they're not exactly identical. And I can understand Poilievre's frustration at facing someone as talented and capable and strong and experienced and deeply understanding of all of the economic issues that Poilievre can only talk about. But I think that what we're seeing, in that sort of personal attack is a lot of frustration from Poilievre and the Conservatives.
This is absolute crap. Absolute crap. Mark Carney is a clown. Mark Carney has no understanding of all the economic issues. How can he even suggest that, in view of the fact that Mark Carney doesn't think steel is a product to Canadians use every day in their lives? That he thinks businesses are going to be forced to pay the carbon tax and not leave the country. Of course they will. They're not going to stay in Canada if they're forced to, as Carney says, pay Canadians for the carbon tax. As he says, these big corporate polluters are going to be forced to pay the carbon tax. Do you think they're going to stay in Canada? No, they're going to leave. So Mark Carney is not very bright. He doesn't understand the economy. It's fingers and toes arithmetic. He doesn't even get it that far. His understanding is not just basic. It is completely skewed. He would be a catastrophe for Canadians. But yet, people are beginning to think he's some kind of economic genius. And we put this together yesterday because I mentioned a great 1979 film about a guy who really didn't have too much on the ball intellectually, but because he only repeated what he'd heard on television in small snippets, he only said enough to make you think he knew more. The public thought he was an economic genius. And that's exactly what's happening to Mark Carney. People are assuming this guy must know everything because, my God, he was the governor of the Bank of England. He was the governor of the Bank of Canada. He's been associated with the World Economic Forum. He worked for the United Nations as their globe-trotting climate change goodwill ambassador. He must know something. But here's the real Mark Carney.
You know, Chauncey, there's something about you. You don't play games with words to protect yourself.
Had no brains at all. The stuff with rice pudding between the ears.
He's very, very sexy. But I think he's brilliant.
I raised that boy.
It's always somewhat surprising to find men like yourself working so intimately with the president and yet somehow managing to remain relatively unknown. Yes, it is surprising.
And look at him now.
I can't write.
Well, I heard he speaks 8 languages.
I can't read.
I like to watch TV.
I understand.
How much steel are you using these days, Todd?
Yes, my friends, that is the Mark Carney who is impressing Tom Mulcair so much, who is impressing so many Canadians. Apparently 40% of them think he's better suited to deal with Donald Trump than Pierre Poilievre. This is absolutely outrageous how anybody who's demonstrated how little he understands can be touted as some kind of economic savior. He's like the character in Being There. There's nothing there. There's no substance. It's just a few phrases he likes to repeat over and over again and ad nauseum.